The bus rattled down the narrow, overgrown road, its wheels bouncing over every bump and rut. Inside, a group of restless high school juniors sat chattering, their excitement mingled with the general boredom of yet another field trip. The destination? A historical tour of the ancient ruins at Ridgely Woods, an old chapel that had stood abandoned for nearly a century. Emily sat near the back, staring out the window, her headphones in, but no music playing. She'd heard the stories about Ridgely Woods growing up in the nearby town. Stories of a mysterious disappearance, murmurs of a preacher gone mad. But those were just urban legends, right? She was a skeptic by nature, but something about the idea of walking through a place with such a grim history made her stomach twist. "Hey, you spacing out again?" Her friend Ashley nudged her. Emily blinked, forcing a smile. "Just thinking." The bus groaned to a stop and Mr. Ellis, their history teacher, stood up from his seat. "All right, everyone, we're here. Remember, stay close to the group. Ridgely Woods can be tricky, and we wouldn't want anyone getting lost." As they piled off the bus, Emily felt the air change. The cool autumn breeze felt thick with something unexplainable, as if the forest itself were watching. The path leading to the chapel was narrow, barely visible beneath the carpet of fallen leaves, and the trees loomed overhead, branches twisted in unnatural shapes. "This place is creepy," Ashley whispered, walking beside Emily. Emily couldn't help but agree. The deeper they went into the woods, the more the unease settled in her chest. Ahead, the ruins of the old chapel came into view, a crumbling stone building with vines snaking up its cracked walls. The once beautiful stained glass windows were shattered, and the door hung loosely on its rusted hinges. "This is the famous Ridgely Chapel," Mr. Ellis began, standing at the entrance. Built in the late 1800s, it served the local community until it was abandoned following a series of unfortunate events. Emily caught the edge in Mr. Ellis's voice. He wasn't going to share the full story with them, but she knew it. The locals said that the preacher who ran the chapel had been obsessed with purifying his congregation, so much so that he drove himself mad. One night, he locked the doors, trapping everyone inside, and set the chapel on fire. No one survived, and the preacher was never found. His body, at least. "All right, we'll split into groups to explore the area," Mr. Ellis instructed, but no one wandered too far. The woods can be disorienting. Emily and Ashley teamed up with a few other friends and made their way around the back of the chapel. The earth felt soft underfoot, almost too soft, as if the ground itself had once absorbed something foul. As they walked further, they came across a small, moss-covered graveyard hidden behind the ruins. "Why would there be graves out here?" one of their friends, Jason, asked, his voice uneasy. "Probably some of the townsfolk," Ashley guessed. "Maybe the ones who died in the fire?" Emily's eyes were drawn to one grave in particular. It was older than the rest, the name etched into the stone nearly unreadable. But she could just make out the words, Rev. Isaac Mulligan. Her breath hitched. That was the preacher's grave. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew through the trees, colder than before, and the leaves rustled in a way that sounded like whispers. A shiver crawled down Emily's spine. She glanced at the others, but no one else seemed to notice. "We should head back," Emily said quietly. "We're going too far." "No way," Jason replied, his grin a little too wide. "We haven't even checked out inside the chapel yet. Who knows what cool stuff is in there?" Reluctantly, they followed him back toward the entrance, where Mr. Ellis and the rest of the group were still lingering. Jason, with his usual bravado, pushed open the creaky door and stepped inside, the others following hesitantly. The air inside was damp and stale, a smell of rot and decay filling the space. Emily walked cautiously through the remains of what had once been the main hall. Wooden pews lay scattered and broken, the altar barely recognizable under years of dust and debris. But it wasn't the destruction that bothered her. It was the heavy silence, as if the walls were holding their breath, waiting. A sudden thud echoed from the back of the chapel. "Did you hear that?" Ashley's voice was barely above a whisper. Everyone froze, the air around them growing thick with tension. Another thud, louder this time, followed by a faint dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. Emily's heart raced, her pulse pounding in her ears. "Jason?" Emily called out, but he was gone. Before they could react, the door slammed shut behind them with a deafening bang. plunging the room into darkness. Panic gripped the group. Emily rushed to the door, pulling on the handle, but it wouldn't budge. "No, no, no," she muttered, her breath quickening. "We're locked in." The dragging sound grew louder, now accompanied by a low, guttural whisper that seemed to come from all directions. It circled them, like a predator toying with its prey. "Who's there?" Ashley shouted, her voice cracking with fear. Out of the corner of her eye, Emily saw it, a figure, tall and shadowy, moving through the darkness. Its eyes glowed faintly, like dying embers. The preacher. It had to be. The whispers turned into screams, filling the chapel with a cacophony of voices, pleading, begging, cursing. Emily felt a hand grasp her arm. She turned, expecting Ashley, but there was no one. Just cold, empty air. The figure drew closer, its form barely human, as if it were made of smoke and shadow. Emily screamed, but the sound was lost in the chaos around her. Desperate, she yanked on the door again, and this time it gave way, flinging open with a force that sent her tumbling outside. The group scrambled out, gasping for breath as they stumbled back toward the bus, their legs trembling with fear. As they reached the clearing, Emily glanced back one last time. The chapel stood silent, the whispers fading into the wind. But she knew, deep down, that something had followed them out. If you love spine-chilling stories like this, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss the next nightmare.